people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears that Clarissa Shields has made a quote-unquote offer for a Jonas super fight, but the ball is in Natasha's court. When they say make an offer, I think they're using that term loosely because upon having read through the article, this fight still entails Clarissa traveling to the UK.
Which can only mean that Sky Sports and Boxer would be the ones paying for it.
Both fighters have made no secret of their interest in what beckons as one of the biggest clashes of the year in women's boxing. Shields riding the momentum of last October's thrilling win over Savannah Marshall at the O2 Arena, and Jonas in the form of her life as unified super welterweight champion.
Unless Dimitri Salita is talking about bankrolling this thing, they're not actually making Natasha Jonas an offer, they're making her a proposal.
They are proposing, which is tantamount to suggesting, because when push comes to shove, the money to do this thing would undoubtedly be coming from Sky Sports and Boxer.
Not Dimitri Salita, because Dimitri ain't got no broadcast partner in America.
Shields is promoted. Dimitri Salita says the American is waiting on a response to her offer from Jonas, who beat Marie-Eve Dicaire by unanimous decision last November to add the IBF female light middleweight title to her belt haul.
This fight won't have the air of the Savannah Marshall fight.
That same air? This fight don't have that because a lot of people felt that Savannah Marshall could knock out Clarissa Shields. On the heels of that fight, a lot of people don't feel Natasha stands a chance against Clarissa, and it's not because Natasha Jonas is a bad fighter.
It's because Savannah couldn't stop her.
She couldn't stop Clarissa Shields, and she's a naturally bigger woman than Natasha Jonas, a younger one too. And if Savannah couldn't stop Clarissa, what chance does Natasha have?
I've seen what people are saying, and they're saying it's a mismatch.
So it's not going to have the same air of intrigue that the Savannah Marshall fight had last year. We love this fight, Dimitri Salita told Sky Sports. The ball is in Natasha's court. I know she talked about wanting this fight with Clarissa, but has not stepped up to the plate to accept it after receiving an offer.
There goes that word again.
Whatever offer Dimitri Salita is referring to, and whatever money is actually on the table to do this fight, it's likely Sky Sports and Boxer's money, not Dimitri's and not Clarissa.
They're not the ones paying to do the show. It would be Sky Sports and Boxer paying to do the show, so who's making the offer?
Is it Dimitri Salita making the offer, or is he simply making suggestions? Suggestions with someone else's money.
It sounds like it.
Shields delivered a clinical display to come out on top against long-term foe Savannah Marshall as the pair headlined a historic all-women's card in London last year. The self-proclaimed GWOAT, greatest woman of all times, seemingly unfazed by the hostile atmosphere that followed her throughout fight week.
She fought her ass off in that fight.
Credit to her, but what I'm imparting to you is not necessarily an indictment on either Clarissa Shields or Dimitri Salita, for that matter. It's just the nature of the beast, the nature of the situation that we're in. That if you're talking about doing a fight with Natasha in the UK, it must be on Sky Sports and Boxer's dime.
Not yours.
Yes, we love the UK boxing culture, its fans and media, said Dimitri Salita. To come to the UK for boxing is always a holiday.
Wasn't that long ago that Clarissa Shields took to her own social media calling for a Savannah Marshall rematch to happen in the United States?
She didn't want to box Savannah Marshall in the United Kingdom for a second time, and yet here she is.
And Dimitri.
Talking about boxing in the United Kingdom again, just against a different fighter, not Savannah.
That's interesting.
Kind of makes you wonder that it's not boxing in the UK that Clarissa has an issue with per se. It's boxing Savannah in the UK that she has an issue with.
It's a big part of why those rematch talks have been stalled.
Because Clarissa Shields has been insistent that if she is to fight Savannah for a second time, it'll be in America. not in the UK.
Okay.
It's incredibly important. Every one of her fights have had historic significance and moved women's boxing and culture at large towards equality, explained Salita. It's her desire to be the best and taking on the hardest possible challenges in the ring to create interest and drive the sport to new heights.
The boxing community at large don't view Natasha Jonas as the biggest challenge for Clarissa.
Because Natasha's not a natural junior middleweight. In spite of having campaigned there for approximately a year, we know this is a naturally smaller fighter that moved up in weight, several weight classes.
That's noteworthy. That's amazing.
Though most will agree she would be biting off more than she could chew opposite the ring, Clarissa Shields. From her pro debut, beating Franchon Cruz, a current undisputed champion, to her second professional fight when she was the first woman to ever headline a boxing card on premium cable television in prime time on Showtime, and obviously her last performance that was initially delayed due to the Queen's passing, which added even more significance to her fight versus her longtime rival, Savannah Marshall. Clarissa traveled thousands of miles away from her home to avenge her only loss in another event that broke viewership records for not just boxing, but women's sports.
And that fight was amazing. It was, the whole card, but this fight with Natasha ain't gonna have that same air because it's not viewed the same way.
A more even fight that might get a similar reaction would have to be Natasha Jonas versus Terry Harper for the undisputed junior middleweight championship. Now that fight, because it's a more even fight, because the pendulum could swing either way.
Because they're both champions at the same weight and because they've got unfinished business.
Currently, Terry Harper, the only other champion at this weight, is set to be taking on former undisputed welterweight champion Cecilia Brækhus, but Natasha Jonas has yet to iron out a fight.
Iron out a deal with Clarissa.
I'm not going to beat around the bush. I don't like this fight for Natasha. I myself think it's too much.
I don't want her to do it.
And it seems to me like it's really just the Shields and Dimitri Salita side of things trying to rekindle interest or restart this conversation, because it has been a conversation for some months now.
There are only so many places Clarissa's gonna make the same kind of money that she made with Savannah.
I'm not a fan of this fight. I'm not. And I'm not going to apologize for that. In men's welterweight and super welterweight news, otherwise known as junior middleweight, Tszyu hits out at Errol Spence Jr. saying, "The guy's a punk."
Needs to stop ducking Terrence Crawford.
Tszyu said that.
No, I did.
Oh, but he did call Errol Spence Jr. a punk. I mean, that bit of it, that did come from Tszyu ahead of the biggest fight of his career against former WBC junior middleweight champion Tony Harrison this weekend. Tszyu has once again been dragged into a war of words with Errol Spence. Tszyu was originally slated to face Jermell Charlo at the beginning of the year, but with the Texan withdrawing due to an injury, Tszyu will instead face the challenge of Tony Harrison. The Detroit star has a superb body of work at 154 pounds, and he represents a stern test for Tszyu, who is the darling of Australian boxing.
Tszyu didn't have to take this fight.
I mean, Tszyu, at least so far, he behaves like a fighter's fighter. You know, he didn't have to agree to anything with the PBC. He didn't have to come to America, fight Terrell Gausha in Terrell Gausha's neck of the woods. Tszyu is a bigger name in Australia than Terrell Gausha is anywhere, much less here.
He didn't have to do that, but he did it.
And in all honesty, he didn't have to fight Tony Harrison either. He didn't have to afford Tony this opportunity. He didn't have to, per se. It wasn't obligatory.
He's already the WBO's interim champion. He's already in position to fight for that title, among several others. He could have kept busy with some domestic level guy.
He didn't have to fight Tony. He didn't have to fight a former champion, a dangerous one. A stern test for Tszyu.
It is. And it's even weirder that Tony Harrison, who's been the beneficiary of all of this, he finds himself asking, what has Tszyu done to deserve a shot at all the marbles, at all the belts?
You know, that's strange. That's a strange question to ask, especially if Tony Harrison is the one asking it, because he's the same one who said that if the roles were reversed and he were in Tim's shoes, he wouldn't be taking on a fight like this.
We talked about it here on the channel.
That because Tim is already at the door of fighting for a world title, he shouldn't be taking on a fight like this, and he appreciates him for it, but better still,
Tony said it in plain English, and he was very honest about it, that if the roles were reversed and he were Tim, he wouldn't have taken on this fight.
You're the same one asking, what has he done to deserve a shot at all the marbles? I think he's showing you.
Or he's about to.
That if he didn't already deserve a shot at all the belts, perhaps after this fight, you'll change your mind.
There's a few things to think about after this fight.
Not just the showdown with Jermell Charlo, assuming that fight even happens, but a potential showdown with Errol Spence Jr. Errol Spence, who Tszyu says He's a punk. The guy's a punk.
Remember, this is the same person who also said Terrell Gausha was going to beat me in my last fight, too. So what happened there, Errol?
I've never said anything bad about the bloke whatsoever, but for some reason, he just doesn't like me. He's Team America. I guess that's how they are. These punks. They will all be put on notice. I've got a long future ahead of me, and I'll pinpoint all of them, one by one, what you must consider moving forward. Beyond this Tony Harrison fight, if Tszyu actually wins it. If he wins this weekend,
Yeah, he stays in line for a Charlo fight, if that fight even happens.
I'm not completely convinced that it will. Better still, what you must consider is that sooner or later, Errol Spence Jr. may see himself campaigning as a junior middleweight.
Oh, I know about the reports that are circulating out there in the boxing cosmos that Errol Spence Jr. and Terrence Crawford are once again communicating with each other in order to do a fight.
And I did a video about it the other day. Needless to say, I'm not getting my hopes up, and it seems that Errol Spence Jr. will in fact be facing Keith Thurman in his very next fight, not Terrence Crawford, because that's what those preliminary reports seem to indicate.
And last I checked, that Keith Thurman fight is supposed to be happening at junior middleweight.
A lot of people like myself have given up hope on seeing Errol Spence Jr. fight Terrence Crawford. A lot of people like myself feel that Errol will probably end up going to junior middleweight when it's all said and done. Maybe he fights Sebastian Fundora. Maybe he fights Tszyu, who at least in this part of the world is a PBC fighter.
Tszyu takes it personal that Errol Spence Jr. is always betting on the other man to beat him.
On the premise of tribalism, American tribalism. Now, tribalism in the sport of boxing is not specific to any one ethnicity or any one region. I think pretty much everyone to some degree is guilty of it in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and yes, in Australia.
If 10, 15, 20,000 Japanese show up for an Inoue fight.
In Japan, what do you think? You think they're there to see Paul Butler?
Come on.
Tribalism and rooting for the hometown fighter, rooting for the home team. It's a thing. It's what sells tickets, and I understand that. Tszyu, however, he's taken it personal that Errol Spence Jr. has a habit of rooting against him, even if it is on that premise.
It's understandable. He still takes it personal.
And it just is what it is. In truth, we don't know here and now that Errol Spence Jr., should he face bona fide junior middleweights like Tszyu, we don't know for sure that he will be able to stay in character. When you think about his welterweight campaign and the sparse schedule of activity that he's been on the last couple of years, I mean, bear in mind, in the last 2 years, this guy's only fought once.
Injuries.
He's only fought once in the last 2 years, two in the last 3.
It is a little bit hard to say that because he has most of the alphabet titles at this weight that he's a dominant champion because he's a barely active fighter.
Barely active champion, injury prone and sparsely in action. That doesn't read like...
Is that what passes for dominance these days?
We've seldom seen Errol in action the last couple of years. We don't know for sure that he'll be able to be the guy at junior middleweight that he was at welterweight. We don't know that.
We don't.
We don't even know that he's ever going to fight Terrence Crawford, and a lot of us have given up hope that he will. The idea that Errol might move up to junior middleweight and face his fellow PBC fighters like Sebastian Fundora, like Tszyu.
I mean, you might be big for a welterweight, a little bit on the big side, not the biggest, but you ain't big at junior middle.
Maybe you're the big fish in a small pond when it comes to welterweights, but you ain't that big a guy up there at junior middle. That's the gist of it.
And size matters, don't let anybody tell you different.
Ask your wife. If Errol Spence Jr. don't fight Terrence Crawford, he's going to have a host of junior middleweights that want a piece of what he's got. And finally, the kickoff press conference for what's supposed to be the Ryan Garcia versus Gervonta Davis fight and what particulars have been made available, recent information divulged. Gervonta Davis versus Ryan Garcia has a 10-pound rehydration clause on top of the fight being fought at 136-pound catch weight.
With the second weigh-in on fight day at 146 pounds.
I don't remember Gervonta Davis and his team implementing this many weight stipulations ahead of the Mario Barrios fight that was fought at a full contracted weight of 140 pounds. I can only deduce that if they're implementing these weight clauses, it's because they view Ryan Garcia as Being a better fighter, at least better than a Mario Barrios.
More of a threat because they didn't catch weight Mario.
Rehydration clause Mario. Second weigh-in on fight day Mario, but they're doing all this stuff to Ryan.
But he accepted it. It is what it is.
Further insight into what I'm always telling you guys, that Gervonta Davis, decent counterpuncher that he might be, most of the success that he's had throughout his career has had a lot to do with careful matchmaking, smoke, and mirrors.
You gonna do all this for Ryan Garcia?
Ryan Garcia himself revealed as much, arriving to the press conference on time, the way that a consummate professional would, and he imparted this.
Let it be known.
The press conference itself, it didn't have any atmosphere. It's not in keeping with the decorum of what you would categorize as a super fight. That could be because it wasn't open to the public, so that energy from the fans, it was absent. It wasn't there.
It seemed like it was just members of the media in attendance, along with the two fighters' teams, their separate teams, the event coordinators, the promoters.
Some microphone issues during the press conference. I'll tell you the truth that it really didn't have the big fight feel. For all you're hearing about this fight, how important it is, how big it is, it didn't feel that way, didn't look that way, didn't sound that way.
You wonder that the kickoff press conference wouldn't have been better suited, better left in the hands of the people over there at Golden Boy Promotions who really do know how to throw a party.
But Golden Boy Promotions, having handled several big fights, very big fights in the past, it wouldn't have been better for the event that they would have been in charge.
I think they should have been in charge.
Seemed more like a late afternoon lunch than the press conference for a fight, a super fight.
Supposed to be a super fight.
Got to see Leonard Ellerby. Haven't seen him in a while, doing his best impersonation, his best impression of Uncle Phil from The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air.
Sporting a pearly white beard.
A far cry from the tapered goatee we've become accustomed to seeing him with over the years.
It was.
I don't know, Leonard Ellerby.
You'd think Gervonta Davis leaving Mayweather Promotions stressed him out.
Well, I said it plenty of times here on the channel. For the most part, all Leonard Ellerby really promoted were Gervonta Davis fights. I mean, it's not like he has an entire stable of guys, a whole stable of guys to take care of, to keep him busy. For the most part,
He had one job.
and it looks like he fell on hard times when Gervonta Davis left Mayweather Promotions, though he was in attendance for this kickoff press conference. I don't know exactly what his role is in all of this.
Might just be there for decoration.
Saw Tom Brown, too. I want to be honest, they had the fighters.
Both boys said a couple of things.
Gervonta Davis, he was fashionably late. He gets there, he says what he says. The energy in the room was low, I'm going to be honest with you.
The most we got in terms of excitement, energy, or just communicating that was when Calvin Ford took the stage.
Calvin Ford, Gervonta Davis's longtime trainer. Gervonta Davis himself, he seemed somewhat dejected.
He didn't say much.
It's probably better that he didn't, because he's no wordsmith.
Trying to get that kid to sound out a coherent sentence can be very awkward.
And they're supposed to be doing the LA press conference tomorrow. Hopefully the energy at that press conference is better and more electric than what we saw at the New York press conference here today.
Remember that after that, moving forward, they're going to rely on social media to promote this fight.
That is what Showtime Sports president Stefan Espinoza said a couple of days ago, which seems largely experimental for what is supposed to be a super fight.
Can't stress this enough. The energy, it just wasn't there.
A lot of people tuned in. I think I saw at least 30,000 viewers by way of Showtime Boxing's YouTube channel during the press conference.
But as far as my thoughts on the conference itself, the whole thing just seemed kind of flat.
Really think somebody dropped the ball here. I think that had there been fans in attendance, they would have carried the atmosphere in the room, brought energy into it.
From what I saw, there was none.